everyone. Welcome, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm just going to tell a little bit of a story about what's happened over the last 6 or 7 years, and then we'll throw it open for questions. And I'm sure, well, I'm hoping there'll be some challenging questions. What I want to start with first of all is how I got here and how I got involved in LOVEFiLM. And the reason why I think this is important is because you know what, there is no one direct route to get to where you want to go to. And if way back at the beginning people had said to me, this is the career path you're going to have, I probably wouldn't have believed them at that stage. So it all started, actually, my grandfather set up a couple of supermarkets. In fact, we as a family lived above one of the supermarkets for quite a while. My elder brother was born there. And what that taught me very early on is actually get out there, get with customers, get involved with customers and listen to them and speak with what's going on. And I remember sitting around the table and counting the takings for the day and checking we had enough to do the staff and all that other thing. So actually very small, and a very small sort of small medium business startup is where it came from. After graduating, I then had the benefit of joining Unilever, and I think part of the attraction for me of Unilever was actually that all those brands, and particularly those soap powders that I'd put on the shelves for years at the dad's supermarket, was actually what I ended up doing marketing and brand building around, which was a lot of fun. I then spent some time in consultancy and a bit of time at Pepsi, where, as Matt just mentioned, we did some exciting things with the Spice Girls. I launched Pepsi Max. We actually turned the Daily Mirror blue, much to Piers Morgan's disgust at the time. But we had a lot of fun just trying to build brands and trying to get some noise going in the marketplace. I then moved to the States, and for a while I was based in New York. And I was based in New York from the late 90s till about 2000. And there was this whole technology revolution going on. And really I thought to myself, actually now's a great time to get involved in the technology revolution. However, the secret about making career moves is doing it at the right time. I unfortunately picked the year 2000 when everything was heading like that. But actually what it did teach you is actually you can struggle in adversity and learn a lot as you go through. Finally, after a period of time in a small business, because I was sort of big companied out, right? If you imagine the Unilevers, the PepsiCos, the Dells, I decided to get involved in a business that had just been part of a management buyout called Riverdeep. And they did interactive education, teaching kids how to read, how to write, and predominantly in the US. And so for the first time, I felt as though I could get my whole arms around a business, and I could actually begin to think about all those different levers, the finances, the people, the marketing, the brand building, what we were trying to do. And although it was probably the hardest job I've ever done, because cash was really, really constrained and it was a turnaround situation, for me personally, it's probably one of the most rewarding things that you can do is when you get a business through that difficult phase on the way to trajectory. Then in 2005, Video Island, a lot of people I knew had just started this and they wanted some help. I got involved in Video Island, and then we merged with a business called LOVEFiLM, and I'll touch a little bit more on what that meant as we went forward. But the key thing for us as we started off in the whole LOVEFiLM and Video Island world is really what was the future going to look like. Now, there are probably some people here who may be involved, who've done lots of research, who've maybe paid lots of research. The reality is research doesn't always give you the answer that you want. And here's some examples that I pulled out in the technology world over the last number of years, just to give you an idea of how really wrong people can get it. There was one gentleman way back in the 40s who said, I think there's a market for about 5 computers in the world. All right? You'd say, okay, wonder what he does. He was actually chairman of IBM. Right? So, not always easy to get right. Second person who said there's no reason why anybody would want a computer in their home. Right? He happened to be president of DEC, which is one of the largest computer companies out there at the time in the 70s. And we foresee a total market size of fewer than 1 million subscribers to mobile devices. That's all of our phones by the year 2000. Actually, I think this was out by a factor of 1 million at the end of the day. And this was very smart people at McKinsey, right, who did a lot of analysis. And the reality is sometimes it's difficult to foresee what's going on. Now, I was rather relieved about this because in 2005, there was a number of people who turned around and said you can never build a rental business, and particularly a film rental business, based on catalogue titles and the tail. And actually, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of LOVEFiLM cynics way back in 2005 who said you'll never, ever be able to do it. Now, the reality is that if we hadn't had the passion, the drive, and the belief in the customer proposition, that actually we felt there was a market there that was completely underserved. It was all the video rental stores that were a long way away from people's homes, that had very little choice, were very expensive, and often charged late fees. If we didn't believe there was a much better way of doing it, then we wouldn't really push through what we managed to do at LOVEFiLM. So where are we now, and what does that look like? So we currently are in 1.7 million homes in Europe, and that's active subscribers, not people who've ever used the service. We have 1.4 million, so just under 1.5 million in the UK. Quite small in Germany, just over 200,000, so just about 250,000 there. And in the Nordics, we're sort of growing. Now, the most important figures for me to look at is that you look at 1.7, you think that's great. The reality is we're less than, in total, we're less than about 2% of our total market that's available. So we have 98% of our market still to go for, based on where we stand today as a business. So even though it feels as though we've been going quite a while at 7 years, actually I think we've only just got going. We have a total target of households of 75 million households that we could reach with physical distribution. Right, that's with physical distribution. When you put on top of that digital distribution and you enter new markets and you're not constrained by the number of distribution centers you have, actually that becomes hundreds and hundreds of millions of households. So I think we've only just got going. There is a huge opportunity for us. But the reason we continue to get the growth is that there are three key things that are really, really important for our customers. And that is we need to have the right range, the right value, and the right convenience. Right? And the reason I stress these three things, we sort of called them the holy trinity of what we were trying to do as a brand in the early days. And this is, when we had 10,000 customers or 5,000 customers, every decision we made, we would do against the screen of what's it doing to range, what's it doing to value, and what's it doing to the convenience of the customer. Now, at this stage, back in 2005, 2006, convenience was all about through the postal service, to your doorstep, no need to go to a rental store. Now, of course, the whole thing has moved on dramatically, and I'll touch on a bit about that in a moment. So we started off in physical, and we built onto a Watch Now service that we now have over 5,000 titles that is all part of people's subscription that they can have. So still really a long way for us to go. So the thing that I just want to stress is, in the early days, we had to be very clear about how we communicated that and what TV commercials you used. And so, what I want to show you here is a TV commercial right back from 2007, which was the first time that we went on TV. I'm going to talk a bit about the thinking behind that, because as a business grows, you need to expand out your marketing activity. So let's roll this TV commercial, and we'll come back in a minute.
Yes.
Want an easy way to rent DVDs?
That's affirmative.
Want to choose from over 55,000 titles?
What?
From just $4.99 a month.
It's nice.
What about late fees? Okay, no late fees ever.
Problem solved.
We send, you watch. It's that simple.
Woo! Yeah!
Even the postage is free.
There's no way you can lose.
For your 2-week free trial, go to lovefilm.com.
Now, the other thing that we did with that TV commercial actually is we built most of it in-house. I've got a great team, marketing, great branding team, and they went to the studios, and we were using what the studios are spending millions and millions of pounds themselves trying to promote, which is all those films. So why not ride on the back of it, build it, and try and communicate what we were trying to do? And that was incredibly successful. And we ran some small tests, and I'll touch on a bit later about some of the money that we spent and the level of money that we spent behind that. The key thing, the reason why we've grown, and this is one of the most amazing stats that we have at LOVEFiLM, is that people who leave the service, right? So those people who are leaving who, for whatever reason, and typically it's because they're moving house or they're changing personal circumstances, but whenever anybody leaves, 80% of them would positively recommend our service to somebody else, right? So even the people that were leaving the service were advocates for us and that were helping it. So word and mouth was absolutely the most critical thing that we had for growing our business. And the only reason that we were able to get the momentum behind that word of mouth was because we really focused, became absolutely maniacal on ensuring every customer experience was the best possible experience we could have. Right? When you're shipping 1 million DVDs a week, right, sometimes stuff happens. Right? You can't help that. But whenever anybody would try and phone up on a customer services line, we would always take the customer's side. We'd always give them the benefit of the doubt. We'd always give them extra rentals to try and improve that. And I think on the back of that, it does exactly what it says on the tin, which is obviously the old advertising adage, is what's grown. And the reason we can see that is if we look at this next chart, which shows on the bottom axis here, it shows the household penetration that we have by each individual postcode in the UK. So when you get your customer data and you do some analysis, try and understand, you know, what's happening there. And then the other axis that we have the change in penetration. So are we increasing our household penetration in those markets or decreasing it? Now this is really important if you're a business leader to try and understand this type of dynamic, because what it says is that actually we are growing fastest and we continue to grow fastest where we have highest penetration per postcode. Does that make sense? So where our postcode is highest, we're actually continuing to grow fastest and really put it. Now from my perspective, there's two things that are really important. First thing is, thank goodness we're not near saturation. Right? If the line were the other way, which means that you'd actually slow down the bigger your penetration were, that means you'd be sitting there panicking saying, how can we drive this business and what can we do? The other thing is now we need to target the word and mouth of each one of those postcodes to say, how can we build it so that we can then get the word and mouth working and get that whole thing working and the referral mechanisms. And one of our key marketing activities that we have, if any of you are LoveFiLM members, I should ask the question right at the start because I know I'll get difficult questions at the end. How many people are LoveFiLM or have been members in the past? Good, okay, right. Get ready with the questions afterwards, I'm sure there's one. But the good thing is that we often send out to people vouchers, not for them, but for them to say, look, if you're having a good experience, if it's really working well, can you pass these on to your friends, actually as a 2-month or 3 months free LoveFiLM service? And what we began to do is use our own customers to help us, and then we now have introduced rewards for our customers for doing that type of thing. We have a Share the Love scheme where if they do a number of referrals and they get a number of people, then actually they can get PlayStations or TVs or money or things that they can actually begin to get as well. So using the understanding that we have here is critical for us. What we've also done is targeted lower postcodes and used other type of marketing activity to try and push up the penetration in there. And we found that once you get to the 1.5% to 2%, it sort of happens automatically that you get a good flow. Maybe it's the dinner parties or the garden fences or whatever. But another reason it begins to flow quite significantly is because of social networking, right? The good thing about social networking is if you provide a great customer experience, the word of mouth is phenomenal. The bad thing about it, if you take your eye off the ball for a nanosecond, it's also everywhere. Right? Ask any hotel owner that's read all their TripAdvisor reviews, right? And I know there's lawsuits and things going on in that area. But the key thing for us is social really adds fuel. So we have in our customer service team, we have one person who's monitoring the blogs all the time, the Twitter feeds, the Facebook comments to see what people are saying about us so that we can understand what we need to do differently and how we need to improve it. We always respond. Some companies say, well, you should respond and pretend you're another customer. Right? I think you are setting yourselves up for a big fall if you do that. Always respond and say you're from LoveFiLM. Always let people know what you're doing. But get involved in the social conversation, the social discourse that's taking place online because you need to, you really need to be there because if you're not there, all your competitors are, and more importantly, all your disgruntled customers are there as well. So technology is also helping us in many other ways. In 2005, we launched a streaming service, which was a download service where you basically stored a film to your computer, you paid for it, and then you watched it in your computer. It was an absolute disaster. Right? We got it wrong. We picked the wrong technology. We picked download technology rather than streaming technology. We had an app that you downloaded onto your computer first, and then in probably half the cases it didn't quite work properly. Every view that people had, so let's say 10 people viewed a film, about 3 to 4 of them would phone up our customer service center saying, we're experiencing problems, how can we do that? And that was clearly not a sustainable model. We learned from that. We actually had to go white, so we pulled back all of our streaming services. And in 2007, 2008, we relaunched our service as a streaming service. We got out there and we, similar to the iPlayer in terms of how that works, we got our number of titles up quite dramatically, and we really began to get on new devices. And our goal now as a business is to get on as many possible devices as we can. So we're on Samsung TVs, we're on Sony TVs, we're on PS3s, we're on the iPad very recently. But what we're trying to do is get as many connected homes as we possibly can to the LoveFilm service. Now, that doesn't mean that they will automatically become LoveFilm members, but once you have the capability to be able to watch your film instantly in your home, on your TV, because that's where the battleground is, on the TV, then the chances are we'll be able to try and sell them LoveFilm and make that work. Because our competitors, we like to pick big competitors here, who are the Skys, the Virgins, and the broadcasters, then if we're not doing it on the TV, they will be, and we won't be able to compete with them. So that's one area that we've really spent a lot of time focusing. And now, frankly, we want to be tarts. We want to be on every device. We want to be everywhere that we possibly can, so that all our customers have an opportunity of signing up to LoveFilm. So we're on an amazing journey, right? And that journey has been fantastic for everybody involved. But I think the best way for me to tell the journey in a little bit more detail is actually to go through and to work through a love story, right? And the way I'm going to illustrate this to make most sense so that you remember it, because if I just put up PowerPoint after PowerPoint, you'll probably all get PowerPoint fatigue in a minute, is I'm going to tell the story based on films, right? And every year there is a film that really sums up what it felt like to be at LoveFilm at the time. So, so let me kick off, right? The embarrassing thing is I start off with a bad film to start with. I'm sorry about that. But the first thing, 2004, really, we were really beginning to get going. And as a business at Video Island, we had 3 VCs, right? And those 3 VCs were working with the management team, and there were 3 of us as a management team. And really what we were trying to do is we were trying to say, what is the best way to help this baby, help this small business grow, right? And how can we do that? We were fortunate enough that we had funding from these VCs. They liked the idea, and really we'd seen the idea work in the US with Netflix as well. But how can we care? How can we nurture this business? And we had to try things very differently. We did a lot of iteration in this stage. A bit like our downloading to start with. We didn't get it right. We didn't get our packages right. We didn't get our prices right. We had to constantly test different ways of doing it. And eventually, what we did is we built critical mass. We began to get customers. We were running at about 2,000 or new customers a month were coming into the service. And then what we did is we merged 2 businesses together, which was Video Island and another company called Screen Select. And we put them together, and we began to get real momentum as we began to work the PR machine. And for all those people in the early days, and if you're in an early startup situation, PR is one of the most fantastic things to get involved with, right? The challenge is with PR is it takes a real long time to get it going. You need to develop relationships with people who are journalists. You need to come across as credible. You need to get customer stories that you can share with it. And you also have to be prepared to be knocked back and pushed and challenged and told that you're completely wrong. But if you stick at it, it really can work. And I think we get probably 10x the return from every PR pound we spent over the last 7 years than we have money we've put in. So that's a really important thing. But at the, so what we did is we had this joint business that we were putting together. It was all beginning to work well. And really 2005, so the following year, became one of the critical years for us. We began to hone the marketing proposition, right? We began to have a great team. We had the good right backers that we had, and we had this proposition. And the customers were beginning to give us great feedback. And that gave us confidence that this idea could work on a really big mass market scale. But in the early days, the most important thing that we had to try and protect was our cash. right? So we weren't fortunate enough to have a cash flow planner and all those other things that are part of the suites that are around now. But what we did is we focused very much on our cash conversion cycle, right? And for those who haven't been involved in a cash conversion cycle, that is basically the difference between getting cash in and letting cash out. And it's measured in days. And if it's negative, that means every new customer that you take in and every new thing, you have to get more cash into the business and increase your working capital to make it work. If you get positive cash conversion cycle, it means you're collecting cash before your customers come in. And what that means is actually as you grow, you build your cash reserves. So getting that model working well for us was critical because the rate that we were growing, if we didn't do that, we would have to go back to our VCs. And if you can imagine Dragon's Den, right, cash in the table in front of people and they're saying, I'm not sure whether that's a good idea, or I'm not sure whether that's a good idea, Simon. But you know, it was that type of situation sometimes. But the key thing is get your cash conversion cycle right so you can grow your cash when you get in there and begin to make that work. And so how can you do that? Right? Obviously, you can pay your suppliers slightly later. The other thing you can do is you can get your customers to pay earlier. And the advantage of us in a subscription business is we could get money from our customers up front, right? And then the terms that we negotiated with our suppliers at 30 days or 60 days, we could then use that money and eke it out over time to make our cash conversion cycle work better for us. So we really did, you know, dig up the business and try and understand what was happening. The other thing that we did on marketing, I think, which is our single most important thing we did, we made 90% of our marketing in the early days was pay for performance marketing. A bit like affiliate fees that you pay whenever you get a click through. And the reason why pay for performance marketing is very, very important is because actually you have to have your performance, you have to measure it, you have to report it back to your marketing person, then they have to raise an invoice, and then you pay them then, right? So rather than paying all your marketing up front, which is I'll pay for 2 pages in the newspaper, we tried to do a deal with the Time Outs and the national newspaper, which is we're a fantastic growing business. I'll tell you what, we'll pay you £20 for every new subscriber that we get coming out of it, and this is what we'd expect. So you know what? There's going to be a 50% premium for you than what we normally pay. Now, we weren't taking the risk, and we were able to actually help our cash conversion cycle. The most important thing that happened in 2005, which I'll get onto, is I had a phone call in September. It was the 1st of September, and I was told, Simon, there's a little fire that's broken out in the distribution centre in Park Royal where the business is. You should just go down and have a look. I was in a hotel close by at the time, and just check it out. So I walked out of the hotel, I walked over the railway bridge, which you could then see the distribution centre that we had there. And as I went over the top of the bridge, I could see 40-foot flames coming out of the top of our distribution centre, right? I hadn't long been in the job. I swore a few times down the phone to my partner at the time and said, oh, you know, it's a nightmare. The whole thing's going to implode. We've lost the business. Now, beauty is, when you're in a rental business, where would you expect your DVDs to be? Out with customers. 75% of our DVDs were out with customers, right? So we didn't lose our stock immediately. We got on the phone as a management team. We made some clear assumptions about what it was. One of the assumptions that we made, which is I think one of the most important things we did, is in the early days, is we said at about 11 o'clock that night, we have to make the assumption that our distribution centre is burnt down and we'll never get anything back. And then that stopped us having that doubt in our mind of, well, maybe we can get this, maybe we can do that. And what we were able to do, because all of our data was hosted elsewhere, we were able to reconstruct our systems. And in a room the size of essentially this stage here, we reconstructed all our operations. And within 24 hours, we were receiving discs again, literally with handheld scanners and receiving discs. In 48 hours, we were dispatching again. We gave our customers full compensation for any of the issues they had. And I think that we built so much customer loyalty because of how we treated them and what we did there, that it was a turning point for us as a business. And for the staff involved, people became known as, were you pre-fire or post-fire? you know, because of how that worked. And I'll never forget, I was stood on some steps like this outside a Lebanese restaurant in North Acton in West London, and we had about 70 people in front of us, and I said, look, this is what we've got to do. Give us all your telephone numbers, you know, let us know how we're going to manage this. We'll get back in touch with you as soon as we're ready to receive discs again. And everybody says, no, we want to help, but the last thing we needed was 70 people in a room this size not knowing what to do. So we called everybody the next day and said, this is the shifts. Everybody went from a normal 8-hour day to a 24-hour 3-shift system without a single word of complaint, and we turned the business around. And it was the most amazing experience that I've ever had in a business and what we did. So, and as I said, it transformed the culture and what we're going to do. So there's only one film that represents 2005, right? And that is Towering Inferno. And at times it felt like we were right at the top of that building to go. At the end of 2005, there was a company in the US called Netflix, which has been in the press for very different reasons recently. But they were sort of pioneering a lot of the activity in this space. So I went and did a trip over to the States. And I met this chief executive and I said, so what are your plans for international? What are you going to do? And he said, well, there's 2 main companies in Europe. There's one called Video Island, which I was running, and there's another one called LOVEFiLM. And we're not sure who's going to win, but we'll probably do something with the winner of those 2 companies. All right? It was a long flight back from the West Coast, and by the end of the flight back, I'd written a business plan of how we could merge Video Island and LOVEFiLM because I didn't want somebody else dictating who was going to win. I went to the board of LOVEFiLM and I said we should merge these 2 businesses together. It took us about 3 or 4 months to complete the deal, which happened in 2006. And essentially, we then built a business that had very strong operations in the Video Island, as was witnessed by the fire in many, many ways. And we had a very strong brand that consumers loved, that really resonated in LOVEFiLM. And coming out of that, we created a business called LOVEFiLM International. And one of the VCs who backed the other business we merged in. We had businesses that we'd acquired in Sweden, that they'd acquired in Sweden. We had a business in Germany, they had a business in Denmark. So we put all these together and created LOVEFiLM International, and that was really the first time that we got these 2 businesses together. However, the challenge is that we'd spent the last 2 years swearing blindly that the other company weren't great and that we were better and that we were the best thing to do. So 2006 sort of felt like sleeping with the enemy, right? And one of the things we had to do is we had to merge these 2 cultures, and we had to grab hold of it quickly. One of the things that we did, which is, I think, in hindsight, one of the best things we did, we didn't move everybody into one office or everybody into the other office. We actually moved everybody into a brand new office, right? So we didn't have which side were you on and how did that work starting on. The other thing, we very clearly defined what were our cultures and what were our values going to be. And more importantly, I got the whole team together, which was a mixture of both companies, my team, and I said, right, this is the behaviors that we have to display. Because if we show one chink that this isn't going to work for all our staff, then you know what, people will jump on it and it'll be a nightmare. So we worked through this. We also worked through a lot of integration. We had to manage our back-end operations. We had to merge all customers, and it really took a whole year for us to merge these 2 businesses and to create LOVEFiLM. And meanwhile, we were also happened to be growing at about 60% that year. So we were managing those 2 things simultaneously and trying to separate the teams into different groups. So 2006, in the back end of 2006, we actually ran a test in Scotland where we did TV for the first time. Right? Remember the TV commercial that I just shown? We'd somehow managed to convince Ewan McGregor that he was going to do the voiceover. To this day, I still don't know how we did that, but we did. And we actually had okay results doing our test in Scotland. And now we'd merged these 2 businesses together and we'd got things going for the first time. We decided, right, what we've got to do is we've got to go big, we've got to build our brand, and we've got to get out there in people's face in the UK if we're going to be successful. So late in 2006, we looked at the results we had on TV. Going in January, I looked at what we had cash in the company, and we had £2.5 million cash. And I said, I want to do a national TV campaign. And the marketing teams came back to me and said, to do a national TV campaign will cost £2 million. So we went for it. All right? We actually went for it. We spent £2 million on TV that time, and it was the best thing that we ever did. You know, bear in mind we did testing to start with, right? This is not a risk. When you speak to entrepreneurs, people say, oh, entrepreneurs are great risk takers. They're not. When it's your money and it's all you've got, you do the analysis to the nth degree to try and understand what you need to do. So we bet 2 million of our £2.5 million cash to say, okay, we're going to go for it and we're going to make it work. We had phenomenal growth, probably near 100% that year. But more importantly, we established our brand in people's minds. Partners started coming to us rather than us cold calling to them and saying, you know, do you fancy doing a deal on marketing? Pay for performance is how we do it. Suddenly we had a lot more of that kind of activity as well going. The other thing that happened in 2007 is that there was another competitor we had in the marketplace called Amazon, who started having conversations with us saying, you know, maybe we should think about, you know, doing something together, you know, at that stage. And really it was in 2008 that we were able to complete the deal. And what the deal we did is that we bought Amazon's customers off them for LOVEFiLM. Now, Amazon never sell their customers. You know, if ever you have, it's the most fantastic company in terms of customer experience. But we convinced them, because we showed them how much we cared about the customer, that the best place for their customers was not in their business, but was in our business. And they took over 30% of our business at that stage. They put some cash in the business, and they took a seat on the board as well. But they began to work with us in 2008 and partner. The other thing that happened in 2008, which is why I've put this up here as 2008, is that in order for that deal to go ahead, we had to go through an OFT investigation. We still thought we were an incredibly small business, but we had to go through and spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds with lawyers in order to make sure that we could get the Amazon deal through, and it actually got through, which was great. The other thing that happened in 2008, you know, we had another couple of companies that came to us. They shall remain nameless, but they are in a similar entertainment space to us, you know, who sort of said, we want to make you an offer you can't refuse, right? Of course, it never was an offer that we couldn't refuse. Sorry, bad impersonations on it. It was, you know, it wasn't a great offer, so we didn't do that. The other thing that was quite hard in 2008 is we'd grown stellar and spectacularly up to that time, but there were some areas of the business, some functions and some regions that really weren't working as well as we needed to. And what became very clear and apparent is that we had some great people that we'd hired in and some great people that grew with the business, but some of the people we had couldn't scale as the business grew in quite the right way we needed to them. And some of the people we brought in actually just weren't the right people for a business that was growing at the pace that we are. Because you need people that sort of rev at a certain speed in order to make that work. And so, you know, the adage that I often use, and, you know, if we're talking about people and people management, the message that I talk about internally more than anything else is, if you can't get to where you want to get to with what you have to change. And so we had to change some people and we had to let them go, and that was quite hard because they'd been with the business a long time. But actually they were inhibitors and they couldn't help us get to where we wanted to get to as a business at the speed we have. And sometimes that goes with the territory, right, of being business leaders that you all are in making some of the tough calls. So that's what 2008 felt like. 2009, if you remember, the back end of 2008 was you know, one of the worst recessions that we'd ever experienced. So 2009, we just had to put our head down. We had to fine-tune our marketing. We had to make sure our acquisition cost was right to the nearest penny. We did all the data, all the customer analysis we did, and we literally ground through 2009 just to get it right. We tweaked things, we adapted things, we constantly learned and challenged each other. But it was a hard year for us. The thing that we had really in our favor that we only realized at the start of 2009 was actually that in a recession, staying in is the new going out, right? And, you know, we grew, and it was probably our most successful year to date in the end, 2009, because of the customers that we added. And we added over, in terms of new customers, well over 250,000 new customers alone in 2009. And so we really began to see things taking off. The back end of 2009 also, we began to introduce our digital service, and we began to see that that was beginning to get going a little bit more. This new service I talked about, the streaming, what was happening there was really beginning to get traction. We were on TVs. We launched the PlayStation network, so you could stream LoveFilm through your PlayStation to your television in the back end of 2009. And we really began to build our technology team. I was fortunate because we were building a reputation that I was able to go out into the market and cherry pick some of the best technology people that I could find who could help build, a really good and a really innovative team where we could launch new services. And we hired in 2010 probably the best part of 60 people in that technology side to really invest heavily in what was going on. The other thing happened in 2010 that I didn't really notice until a bit later on was Amazon, who were a board member, were getting very interested in the technology that we were developing, were getting very interested in the results we were having, and actually began to take a lot more interest in us as a business. And it was in 2010 that they actually launched a bid, and they said, look, we like you, we've been working with you now for a few years, we'd really like to think about you coming part of the Amazon family. And for anybody who knows Amazon, right, they're based in Seattle. So the back end of 2010 was actually spent a lot of time on planes, going and speaking to the teams, getting to know them. We thought they knew us because they're on the board, but they needed to know us in a lot more detail than we were currently experiencing. And it took us a long time to work it out and to work out what was the best deal for everybody involved. And so in the early part of 2011, in February of 2011, there's only one film that really sums up what we were able to do. And what's the expression that comes from Jerry Maguire? Show me the money, right. So Amazon, we concluded the deal. All our investors did well. They were able to get out of it, and Amazon now owns 100% of LoveFilm. And on the back of that investment, because they absolutely were the most fantastic home for LoveFilm, we've gone on to new devices, we've launched new content, we've got great deals. We have, for example, an exclusive that nobody else will have, the Twilight film. I know not many of you here are Twilight fans, I can guess, right? But, we're going to exclusively, nobody else is going to have it. Not Sky, not Virgin, not anybody else. We're beginning to do deals that we can actually offer the best possible content. And that's off the back of, Amazon's support, investment, and activity that's gone on. So it's early in 2011 yet. We're 6 months in to our relationship with them. But it has been, a great journey so far. And for all those who have a business that one day you think may be bought by somebody else, it was back in 2005 that I first met an Amazon senior executive in a bar in Seattle for a catch-up and a get-to-know-you. And so it took 6 years or 7 years worth of cultivation, developing, them coming onto the board and working that. So, if you are in that situation, the advice I'd give you, if there are 2 or 3 people that you think may end up becoming partners that you work with, pick them out early and start to develop relationships with them, because you never know where it can go, in terms of how that works. So we had a lot of change, right? And as I talked about earlier, there's a company values that we talk about. So we love our customers, we're passionate about film, innovative, we want to be famous for the right stuff, and we have an all-star cast. Now, the posters have evolved over time as the business has evolved, but essentially we've tried to stick with these values and really communicate them consistently through. And every month when we have our town hall meetings, we get together and I award prizes to members of staff in any one of our regions or functions or areas based on how well they perform against that, whether they've done something innovative. So I'm constantly, if you like, trying to reinforce what that happens. And sometimes we don't get it right, and when we get it wrong, we have to say, sorry, we'll get better next time. We do a staff survey once a year. We used to do it once every 6 months. And one of the really interesting things, which is how we reward our people, that I'll touch on in a minute, which is a bit different. So I pulled together 6 LoveFilm learnings that I just thought I'd share. And then I'll show you where we are in terms of the latest technology, and you can have a look at the contrast between where we were in 2006-07 and where we are now. So the first thing I would say, and was one of the most important things, is if you think back to the fire scenario that we had in 2005, if you think about some of the bumps that we've had on the road, some of the competitive threats, I spent in the early days probably about 30 to 40% of my time recruiting my direct team. And these are the people that you've got to live with, and these are the people that you've got to be day in, day out with. And I don't think you can shortchange the quality of that. The second thing is we manage performance. Everybody in LoveFilm has a quarterly appraisal. Right, we reached 350 people before we hired our first HR person. Anybody from HR in the room? Sorry. But the reason is because we got our managers to manage what was going on, and they sat down with their teams every quarter against 4 or 5 objectives. How did you do? Were you underperformance, under target, over target, or on target? And we had, everybody in the organization has about 10% or maybe 20% of their pay based on performance-related pay, and we give them that at the end of each quarter based on what they've done. So let's say they have, I don't know, they get paid £1,000 is their performance-related pay a quarter, so that's maybe £4,000 a year or £40,000 as an individual. Then if they've performed at 120%, then we pay them 120% of £1,000 if they've performed under. The advantage it gave me as in my role was that every quarter I could see the performance of every person in the company on how well they performed, with 100 being on target and 90 or so being below and 120 being above. Now, it wasn't really so much at the end of the day the extra £50 here or £50 there, but what it said to people is that I want to constantly improve. And when we had to do some of the integration work, some of the changes that we needed to do, having people on a 13-week cycle was really important for me to be able to change how quickly the ship was going to turn. If we'd had an annual cycle and people said, I'm sorry, these are my objectives, I'm sorry you agreed these at the start of the year, this is what you're paying me on, I just wouldn't have been able to deliver. The second thing that was really important is that it wasn't based on how well the company did, it was based on how well they did. And if we had a great quarter and people were underperforming, or we had people were overperforming and we didn't have a strong quarter, then what that meant is myself and the management team weren't doing a good job of prioritizing what were the important things that we needed people to do. And so we needed to think about that better and make sure that that was more integrated to how it works. So quarterly performance, PRP, was a big part of what we did. The other thing that you need to do is, you are seen as leaders and managers and directors of your business as the most visible thing, and all your staff take even the tiniest cues from you. And as we got bigger, we're open plan, nobody has an office, right? As we got bigger, we stayed open plan, everybody was visible. We did an office reshuffle one time, and we moved, some of me and my team into one part of the office, and actually people kept saying to us, well, you're now in a corner. That's like executive corner. Nobody wants to go there because they're embarrassed about going over there. So we had to reshuffle and put us in the middle of corridors so that people could see us and talk about what was going on. And sometimes you come across really great people in your organization, but those great people are completely disrupting everybody else. And I think the sad thing is that if you want to maintain culture and be consistent, if you don't act on a bully, even if they're a superstar, the organization says this organization tolerates bullying, even though you personally may not. And so that's very interesting. The other thing just to talk about is people operate best in small teams. We used to have a tech department. In the early days, it was about 20 people or so. We used to prioritize the things that we needed to do. We'd feed it into the black box. And then at the end of the month, we'd say what's been done, and chances are not a lot was done, or the priorities shifted or changed, and we never got anything done. So what we've done now is we've broken our organization into individual pizza teams. We call it pizza teams because that's a team that you can feed with 1 or 2 pizzas. Right? Not rocket science. And what that means is that cross-functional teams working together against their own timeline and their own roadmap. And especially if you're developing or you're creating or you're making things happen, it's transformed our ability to do it, because what people do is they own the output and they own the next output and the one after that, because they're thinking ahead and they begin to manage that a lot better than we've done before. Communication, I've touched on that. It's all about, it's a classic situation. You've just been to a town hall and you come out of the town hall and people say, so how are we doing? And you think to yourself, actually, well, no, I've got to go back and re-communicate and communicate again because it's just not getting through. And as I talked about earlier with my Godfather slide, sometimes, as leaders, you just need to challenge. And, sometimes you have the best benefits. You can have, great with your employees, but sometimes you need to make the tough calls. And people are looking to you to make the tough calls. In 2007, we actually had an issue in Sweden where we were so busy integrating these 2 businesses together in Sweden that we lost sight of the issue and we had a bit of a customer issue. And so I sent an edict to the organization, which wasn't very popular, which was nobody can make a single decision that impacts the customer unless I sign it off. All right, now, if you imagine, at that stage, you probably had 300 or so people. The first week I had 2, the second week I had 1, and the third week and thereafter, nobody came to me. Because what happened is they found a way to give a good customer experience and still resolve the issue. And then I didn't need to say anything ever again, and people sort of got it. So sometimes you need to make those tough calls, which I know is never easy for any of us. But the business does evolve, and the business has evolved quite significantly over the time. And recently, as much as 2 weeks ago, we launched a new device, which was for the iPad, which was our new service. We launched with 500 titles. We're adding about 100 to 200 titles every week at the moment that will begin to appear. And as a LoveFilm subscriber, it's all part of the service. So rather than me talk about it or give demo, there's a bit of video that shows it. Sorry if it's a shameless bit of advertising, right? But then we can throw it open for questions. So do you want to play the last reel?
Love Film.
Yes, you know your stuff.
We've got Britain's largest range of movies.
Anything you want here, we got it.
And we think you should be able to rent them any way you like.
That is correct.
By post, you can have Blu-rays, DVDs, and even games with no late fees ever. Or you can stream movies straight to your PC, Internet TV, or PS3.
Whoa!
In fact, we think you should be able to enjoy your movies how you like, where you like. That's why from today, you can get LoveFilm on your iPad. That's right. If you've got a LoveFilm account, simply download our clever LoveFilm Player app and you can stream thousands of incredible movies straight to your iPad.
Yes!
Choose from movies by major and independent studios, from action and adventure to family fun. Just look at the movies coming up on the service.
How'd you get here?
Just stuck out my thumb.
I'm not saying war, I'm saying lay down the law.
Double O quits.
You're on.
So, boys, where are we headed?
3:10 to Yuma, day after tomorrow.
I don't want anyone else.
Jack. Spanner!
Isn't that your car, Malloy?
Couldn't be. I left mine at the office.
Using it couldn't be simpler. All through the touch of a screen, you can find your favorite stars, check out the trailer.
What's he doing?
I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die comfortable.
Read reviews, or just sit back, relax, and start watching on a screen that was just made for movies.
Yeah, go get it!
You can fast forward, rewind, pause, or play again. And if that sounds too good to be true, then get this. As a LoveFilm member, you get all this as part of your subscription.
You're welcome!
LoveFilm, now on your iPad.
Okay, and you'll notice in there the subtle LoveFilm and Amazon company as well, which obviously helps us. And that helps us actually more in markets where LoveFilm is a newer brand name, like Germany, where we're just beginning to get the services established. Right, now we have technology, and I have some questions on here. So shall I read those out, start it up, and then if there's roving mics around, we can take some questions on the as we go through as well. Right, what is your favorite film and why? GB asks, and the answer is I love Gladiator. I'm sorry, but it's a great film, and the good guy sort of wins but dies. It also, surprisingly, for more people don't know, it won a huge number of Oscars for screenplay and score and cinematography and something. So that's what I like. Can I get any movie ever produced? What we can do, we can get any DVD that is available for rental. Some DVDs we're not allowed to rent. And we actually had a promise on the service, which is if there was a DVD that we could rent and we didn't have it, we'd get it, and whoever asked the question would be the first to rent it that we had. So we do that. Dominic, in testing your concept on a small scale, were you concerned competitors would steal the idea? I think that's a great question. The answer is that what we had to do was we had to move fast and constantly innovate and change the idea. The idea itself wasn't something that we came up with. It was working successfully in the US. There were lots of other ideas, but what we did is we took that American idea and we changed it, and we put cat packages in, and we evolved it, and we put games in there, and we changed it slightly so that actually we offered a different proposition. The advantage that we had, because our biggest competitor at the time was Blockbusters, as you can imagine, the advantage we had at the time was that Blockbusters also had a store business. And one of the hardest things to do is when you have a business is cannibalize it with something else new that's done. And what that meant that they weren't as successful at implementing and launching that online service that we were, because they were sort of trying to do both things together. And even when they did get both things together and offer an in-store exchange type service, it wasn't particularly well executed. So, that's why the number of Blockbuster stores has probably halved in the last few years, and we continue to grow. Okay, film onto a desert island, Lorna. I take Gladiator. That came from anywhere. Was it Blockbusters who made you an offer you couldn't refuse? No comment. I think plead the fifth is one. I'm not allowed to talk about those types of things. Why is LoveFilm not available in Ireland? There's two reasons. One is the rights that we have as the service. And the second is our service is incredibly dependent on having a robust, quick, efficient postal service. And we did some tests, and that wasn't quite what we got there, which is why UK, Germany, Nordics is where the postal system had. In the future, when we think about digital, we're not bound by those same constraints. So watch this space is all I can say. Right. The research of the name LoveFilm. As you remember, we acquired LoveFilm, so I would love to say that I thought of LoveFilm. The reality is I didn't. There was a great investor in LoveFilm at the time who came up with the name. Initially, we came up with a lot of issues. People would say, Simon, why are you running a pornography service? But actually, the key thing is I once sat in a room of some investors, and they said, why LoveFilm? Isn't that about X and Y? And I said, okay, you all walk out of here, all 20 of you. Of the 5 presentations you've had, which name will you remember most? And the reality is LoveFilm stuck in people's names and built that cachet and following. Why don't I get my high priority discs? There's a customer. Here I have a customer question. The reality is use your list. You can do high, medium, or low priority. Just put more discs in your high priority and take this off, because we're able to manage through that. Literally in over 80 or 90% of the time, we are sending out people's top priority discs that they manage. And sometimes we just can't do that, which is why having both a physical service and a streaming service together will be the perfect service for us to go through. Maggie asks, how easy was it to measure performance for staff appraisal? The way we structured that performance-related pay that I talked about, we had a sheet with 3 columns, which is, this is what a 75% performance looks like, this is what 100% performance looked like, and this is what 125% looks like. And of the 3 or 4 things, and you have to keep it to 3 or 4 things, how did you perform on each one of those? And that's how we managed it. When people weren't performing, or they were consistently underperforming, then because we had this quarterly record, we could actually sit down with them and say, is it a development need? Are you just not getting on? And how can we focus? So we're able to use that tool in many, many different ways. Carl, which doesn't sound like a Spanish name, but wants to know, can he access LoveFilm from Spain? Not yet, is all I can say. Can I get the new Eric Bana film, the one with Kate Blanchett? Maybe we should visit that one at the end if you have to take it offline. Right, okay, probably is the answer. It's on DVD, absolutely. What's been our favorite PR strategy? Well, I think going in is the new, staying in is the new going out was the one that I really, really liked, that resonated for us. The other thing that we did actually is used customer surveys. Which is the favorite Bond car just before a James Bond film comes out? Who is your favorite actress over 60 when Helen Mirren wins the Oscar? And those things. And we constantly drip those into the press. And over the years, they have been the most successful way of just constantly getting stories put in when newspapers sit there and say, all right, we've got 2 or 3 column inches, how can we fill it and what can we do? And typically that goes with, you know, with a nice picture that comes from the press as well. Right, great question about Watchdog. Some of you may have seen that we had a question on Watchdog recently where a third-party selling organisation weren't following the script. Right, the moment we heard that was the case, we suspended that service. Absolutely, every customer experience has to come first. They were intensively retrained. If people didn't pass that retraining that they were on, then we didn't do that. We have mystery shopping now going on all the time with these third-party sellers. You know, I talked about word of mouth and loyalty. We absolutely have to ensure that we stay on top of that, and that was a good feedback that we had from them. So all that training is now built in, and we've changed that. Why can't, the same question about Ireland and PS3, the answer is we don't have the rights for that. What are the downsides of being bought out? And Daz asked that question. Well, it's not a small independent company anymore that you're running and you're creating the culture and you're doing that. You actually have a lot of influence from other parts of the organization. So that changes, and the chief executive role changes quite dramatically, right? You're not having board meetings anymore, you don't speak to investors, you're not doing that. And so that is a change of role, and you know, potentially could be a downside. The upside is that you get millions and millions of marketing opportunities that you never had before, that you can have the money and the cash to invest. If we had taken this business public, which is one of the things that we were talking about at one stage, it would have been a real challenge for us to invest the amount of money that we have done in new content for streaming services and keep the business going forward and be speculative about what we were trying to do. So it actually ended up being, I think, absolutely the right thing for us to do. Even though a few people's role in the organisation has changed. If you speak to our finance people, they'd go, yes, you know, dramatic changes in terms of what they had to do. And one more. Actually, should we just take 1 or 2 from the floor? Am I okay? 1. All right.
Do you find that Sky and Virgin are going to be your biggest competitors in the internet streaming TV business going forward? Because that seems to be the opportunity to fill off demand.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the question was, you know, who's going to be the competitors in the future? Is it Sky and Virgin, or is it over other services? I think what we're competing for now is the share that somebody spends sat in front of the TV. Are they watching broadcast channels, Sky and Virgin, or are they watching us? And a lot of people are members of Sky, but are also LOVEFiLM members because they get more choice in film at a better price. So I think the reality is it's going to be coming from everywhere. And I think what we need to do is get exclusive titles, get connected to the TV, make sure that works, and never lose sight of the value proposition that we need to be a better value proposition than those big companies. The main thing is that you can actually get out of our contract on a month-by-month basis. You're not locked in. So a lot of people try it. We do a lot of free trials, and then once they're into it and they like it and they get hooked on the service, then obviously they stick with it. Thank you. All right, well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I'm around down here for questions.